What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so this is the situation we have right here. Tropical Storm Ian has now formed, ladies and gentlemen. We have the latest public advisory from the NHC right here. It has winds of 45 miles per hour, as you can see right there. Tropical storm force winds now extend 60 miles from the center. Or last night, it was around 30 miles, and the pressure is down to 1,003 millibars. So this is strengthening in some regard, actually. It was at 1,006, then it was at 1,004, now we're down to 1,000, actually 1,006, 1,005, then 1,003. So it is starting to slowly strengthen. The winds aren't catching up to it, but the pressure is dropping. And whenever the pressure falls, the winds will usually catch up with it. So that's what we're looking at right there. We still have a hurricane watch for the Cayman Islands, tropical storm watch for Jamaica. If we take a look at the cone right there, it is expected to strengthen into a hurricane by tomorrow. Right here. By tomorrow at 8 p.m., it is expected to strengthen into a hurricane much quicker than anticipated. It was supposed to be a hurricane as it was approaching the Cayman Islands. Now we're looking at that tomorrow. Another thing we are noticing here is that the cone has shifted more towards the west, which would mean that it would lessen its impact on Cuba, give it more time over water, and potentially more time to strengthen right there. So this is something we're going to have to pay attention to. If it continues that shift towards the west, that could potentially put the Florida Panhandle in play, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, that's what we have to keep an eye on. Let's go ahead and take a look at the global sea temperatures. 28 to 30 degrees Celsius all around the Caribbean Sea, all around the Gulf of Mexico, where it's going to be heading. So, yeah, an abundance of warm water. The ocean heat content is absolutely insane. Where this system is now, it is in that 125 area of ocean heat content. It is going to move into 150, 200 kilojoules per centimeter ocean heat content as it approaches Cuba right there. And that's where it's likely going to be rapidly strengthening, at least at first. And then it'll make landfall in Cuba, enter the Gulf of Mexico, where the waters are once again piping hot. And if it moves far enough to the west, it'll enter that loop current right there and potentially strengthen even more. So we'll have to take a look at that. Then we'll go ahead and take a look at the wind shear. This is the system right here. It is in very weak wind shear. Once this system gets its act together, and it's starting to, this thing will rapidly strengthen, and the NHC seems to agree to as well, as they're expecting a major hurricane potentially at landfall over Cuba, and then it's supposed to enter the Gulf of Mexico. We could potentially see some weakening as it approaches Florida, likely due to some dry air that's in the Gulf of Mexico. However, there was an incident back in 2020 with Hurricane Laura when it first entered the Gulf of Mexico. The outflow boundary pushed everything out and gave the Gulf of Mexico perfect conditions for its rapid strengthening. So we'll have to pay attention to that as it continues to develop. We're not sure exactly how that's going to work, but we will update you guys as this continues to develop. First, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the track models and the intensity. The track models have shifted more towards the west and has landfall more towards the north in Florida. Because yesterday we were looking at landfall in Naples, then Cape Coral, and even still now we're looking at potential landfall in the Tampa area, and now it's pushing more towards the north. So that is potentially going to be a net good news, but any landfall from a major hurricane is bad news. But if there is any good news, it's potentially not going to be making landfall in Tampa, although they could see some hurricane force winds over there. So that's what we're looking at right there with the track models. It has it making landfall on the western tip of Cuba right there. Potentially not going to be really doing anything. The landfall in Cuba is likely going to be a net positive for this hurricane. The reason I say that is because when hurricanes generally make landfall, the eyeball starts to expand and as time continues to go on over land, it expands out further and further until it collapses on itself. But this is only going to be over Cuba for probably 2 to 3 hours, I imagine. So this will be a net positive because the eyeball will expand out a considerable distance, but it won't really go to the point where it starts collapsing on itself, which that could potentially mean a larger hurricane force wind fields, but we'll have to pay attention to that as time continues to go on. Intensity models, more models now have it as Category 4 strength right here, ladies and gentlemen. We have the majority around mid to high range Cat 3 right there as it approaches Cuba and enters the Gulf of Mexico. And then we have that landfall in Florida right there. where it starts weakening considerably. So we're going to run some model runs with you guys. We're going to go ahead and start with the HMON run. Let me get that up for you guys. The HMON run, we're on Ian right here. The HMON has this thing organizing, developing, starting to strengthen a bit, and then it becomes a hurricane west of the Cayman Islands right there. The Caymans could definitely see some strong tropical storm force winds from this, and then this thing will make landfall in the western tip of Cuba. Pressure around 971 millibars is likely a Category 2 hurricane right there. It will be a net positive for this thing, and then enter the Gulf of Mexico, where this will start really strengthening and intensifying right here. The pressure goes down to 944 millibars, and with the max winds around 160 knots right there, this is probably Category 4 strength right there. And then this thing kind of weakens a little bit as it's approaching land, likely due to some dry air. And depending on how that dry air, if it intrudes in there, or the hurricane could completely block it out with an outflow, massive outflow push like Laura did. We'll have to pay attention to it once it enters the Gulf of Mexico, but it is expected to make landfall as potentially a Category 2 or Category 3 hurricane. Moves over land, basically at 5 days this is over Florida right there, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. So we'll have to take a look at the GFS next, because the GFS, it's a longer range model, but we'll have to continue to pay attention to it. This thing organizes, develops, strengthens, becomes a major hurricane, potentially a Category 4 hurricane off the coast of Cuba, completely misses or makes a clipping on the Cuba tip right there, and then it really strengthens down to a 930 millibar hurricane right there, and with the max wind area of 141 knots at 850 right here, this is likely this is a Category 4 hurricane. Pressure drops to 927, and then it starts to rise again, and then it really considerably weakens. I know there's dry air in the Gulf of Mexico, but it's not going to weaken that much. This goes from a 927 to 992 millibar. That's a 65 millibar increase, and that tears apart from a Category 4 to a Category 1. I know the dry air is potentially going to weaken the system a little bit, but I don't think it's going to weaken it that much. So, yeah, we'll continue this thing. It moves into Georgia right there, kind of does this thing, and then that's pretty much the last we'll hear of that. Now we'll go ahead and show you the HWRF run, because the HWRF generally is the more aggressive of the runs. We'll go ahead and show you it's organizing, developing, strengthening, becomes a hurricane a couple hundred miles west of Jamaica, and then it approaches the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands could once again see some strong tropical storm force winds. It becomes a major hurricane, Category 3 strength right there, misses Cuba entirely, and then it kind of enters the Gulf of Mexico. The pressure continues to stay stagnant. We do see max winds. This is potentially a Category 4 hurricane right there, and then as it approaches land, we're at 150 knots max winds right there. That's likely a mid to high range Category 4 right there for you guys. And then as it approaches land right there, it is looking like it's aiming for the Florida panhandle right there. And the HWRF keeps the system together as it's approaching land. So this is something we'll have to keep an eye on as time continues to progress. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Helps me out, helps me make more videos like these. The goal of this channel is to get more people engaged with weather. The interview between me and Ethan WX, it should be coming out by around 3 o'clock today, so please be sure you do not miss it. I hope you enjoy it. So with that being said, have a wonderful day. Stay safe.